we have finally reached the end of the Iliad. Well, not for a series yet, but sure enough, I'll probably be making that orbital something. The orbital model theory video you're going to make me make, the meme master. So, let's get this started. The whole book is basically a sham. It's the end of the Trojan War, and why I'm saying a sham is because Homer didn't make this up himself. He just copied it. I mean, sure, today we call that plagiarism, but back then, like, oh, it's good to copy someone's work. Well, as long as the person who you're copying from doesn't know. And let's get more talking about this. So the Iliad has much more to reveal to us. I mean, it's the end of the Trojan War, and then again, why even read the Iliad yourself? Well, then there are some reasons to read the Iliad, as it could expand your knowledge. Of course, if you like mythology, this would probably be one of the sources you would like. And if you want to make a mythology book like Percy Jackson, or just want to record some things into a much simpler book, like how Mary Pope Osborne did with the Odyssey and created 2 books about the Odyssey, part 1 and part 2, by the way, in a much more simpler version, well, that's exactly what you'll get. So, what do you get? What's the point of the Iliad anyway? The point is that if you read it, there's much more to really understand in the world. Homer probably wrote this. Of course, he probably did. But then again, he is just a copier. He's just a person who's like telling the stories on and on so that people will know about them. And he's the only one his book is probably the most important manuscript that survived the burning of the fire. And so that's probably the only version of the Trojan War in the last days before the fall of Troy is done. So this is probably the only account we have. So secondly, why another reason to read the Iliad is just to have some fun reading it. I mean, sure, it has so much lengthy words, and it's like it like describes things so uselessly. But then again, if you think about it, it's really short. It should take about a few pages, maybe 300, or just half of the book if it was in a regular text type. Then you would, if this wasn't regular text type, then you would probably be getting a myth that was, well, something of a different than what we would get today. And so this is divided into 24 books. In fact, the first time I started reading this, I thought, how can I read all this in like less than 1 month? And then I realized if I read like a few books every week, I could finish it. And now here I am. I finished the book before I like started recording this video. And yeah, it's kind of awesome, really. And so what do you get if you make up a little mush of Homer and Iliad together? What you get is a little mush of Homer and Iliad and some paper. But then again, what if it was a hypothetical one? Like, not the real mush kind of thing. You know, dump Homer Simpson in there and Homer and put the Iliad like straight into the blender. All you get is probably this. You probably get a great story that has something of a little taste to it. It's a poetic, of course. Why this is not poetic in the English version is because of the translations. I mean, sure, it's free verse, because it's a translation. In Greek pronunciation, it would probably be poetic and also rhymey, if you ask me. But then again, we have to translate it, and the only person who I know who I'm reliable at is Robert Fagles. I just call him Fagles. Like, rhymes with bagels, because that's one of my favorite foods. Cat. Another thing that is that I just wanted to really announce to you guys that the Iliad is probably not the only account we have of the Trojan War. Of course, it's probably the only account we have about the times before the end of the Trojan War, but it's not the only one, as I used to think. It turns out that the Iliad is just talking about the end, and the other books actually talk more about it. So why the Trojan horse is in the Iliad is because it's not in that time range. It's in the Odyssey. It's discussed in the Odyssey, right? Nope, it doesn't. So that was kind of disappointing. Well, so that's basically what happens. And so Homer never really talked about the Trojan horse. I'm not even sure if he believes there was a Trojan horse, to be honest. I mean, other accounts do have the famous Trojan horse in them, but in our cases, for the Iliad, we'll be talking about a Trojan War where Achilles does die, but doesn't have the Trojan horse. What's the point of the Iliad, then? I mean, yeah, I could say that myself, too. I read the Iliad. To be honest, the first time I started reading Iliad, I was starting to get bored, and To be honest, I was reading it during my bedtime, and my mom let me stay late so that I could finish reading it. I could at least finish reading the introduction, and it just fell after fell asleep during I was during reading the introduction, and I'm not sure what happened next though. But I started having the dreams of the Trojan horse. Eventually, when I finally finished the last book, I realized there was no Trojan horse in the Iliad. Another thing that you should be careful about and not make assumptions about the Iliad before reading it is that Achilles doesn't die in this, so there's no mentioning about the Achilles heel, but I'm pretty sure most scholars would say that Achilles did have a vulnerable heel. Unless it's some of those hypothetical scholars who says Achilles didn't have a vulnerable heel, according to the source, and that's probably the only source they'll have. And so what happened next is much more of a little misnomer to me and you. What I'm just gonna say is that there's just so much to really talk about that I can't cover much. I mean, I'm talking nonsense right now. The Iliad has so much to discuss to us. I mean, one of the morals, I guess they would tell us, is that don't try to make enemies. If you do, you'll probably make something that you don't want to. And also, don't make your friend an enemy. The enemy, as someone says, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah. Unless that enemy of your enemy is your enemy. So, how does that work out? I'm not really sure myself too. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of other videos that talk about the Iliad. And what's the point? Like, I don't know, SP's What's the Point of the Iliad by Blue. I'm not sure what his real name is. And the only thing I can discuss is that the only reason why I read onto the Iliad is because it's a war epic. It talks about wars, it talks about killing, and it talks about death, and it talks about battles, it talks about like kidnapping and stuff. And spying, that's one of my favorite parts. I mean, a spy attacking a spy. 2v1, that doesn't seem fair. Especially when the two was the Achaeans. And one of the spies was Odysseus, who was actually the most stealthiest spy, and who's probably the only one who's spying. And that's all I'm going to say. So, that is probably the end of the point of the Iliad. If you guys want to read the Iliad, which I'm pretty sure I didn't convince you to do, because I just told you all of the negative parts of the Iliad, but still, if you want to read a whole war epic about battles and someone killing someone, and also starting to getting Troy back and start to get the Epic of Troy, well then, you just got the right book here. But unless you don't want to read the whole real manuscript, I guess you could read the simpler versions of it. So I'll see you guys in the next episode. I'll see you guys then. Shut out. Peace. Ow, my eyes!